Welcome to the MadLove Your Life Show. I'm Mary D, the Joy Catalyst, here to be your host and transformation guide. Mad Love is about the mad, making a difference, and love is what we serve up to live a delicious life. My intention is to help you spark new ideas, break limiting beliefs, and align with your deepest dreams and desires. Get ready for laughter, inspiration, and finding your inner roar in every show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the MadLove Your Life Show. It's great to have you here today, and I have a super special guest, a good friend of mine and a fan-frickin-tastic person. Her name is Dr. Mary Grimberg, and she is a pelvic floor and orthopedic physical therapist and the owner of Resilience RX, a multi-clinician physical therapy and wellness practice in Austin, Texas. She helps people move through perimenopause, which is beyond hormone replacement therapy, by regulating the nervous system and addressing the whole person from a mind, body, soul perspective. Through a movement and rehab lens, she teaches women to understand their bodies, recognize patterns, and gain control. She's also the host of the TMI Talk with Dr. Mary podcast. Dr. Mary's mission is to reshape the perimenopause conversation by bridging science with empowering tools that give both practitioners and clients more options, freedom, and confidence through life's transitions. And I want to share with you guys today, if you are a man and you're listening, you're like, I don't need to listen to perimenopause. I don't know what that's about. I want to share with you that actually you do, because I guarantee you there are some wonderful women in your life that you love and care about. And as they age and as the time moves on, you're going to want to know what's happening with them or what could potentially be happening with them. Because if you have someone in your life who just seems really unregulated, and I know most of us know someone in our life that's really dysregulated, this could be the cause. And this affects everyone, all of our sisters, mothers, aunties, daughters. It's going to show up at some point in their life. And it's really important for you to also hone in and listen and really get an idea of what's happening and what's going on and just all the things that are involved when our body starts to get a little older and our hormones shift. So Dr. Mary, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your wisdom and your energy today. I know we're going to have a great call and that you are going to probably give us some aha moments for a lot of the women out there that are struggling with the aging process around what is going on with my hormones, what's going on with my emotions. Why am I feeling super emotional? Why am I having so many highs and lows? Let's first talk about some of the symptoms that show up in perimenopause, because I think that part is going to be the first place where people can raise their hand and go, I see this in myself, or I see this in someone in my life.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of symptoms that can pop up, but I'd say the first few that people will notice is immediately like gaining 15, 20 pounds seemingly overnight. It's not really overnight, but it feels like to them. They haven't changed anything. There's nothing different. All of a sudden, bam, you've gained 15, 20 pounds. That's a big one. Sudden inability to sleep. So not sleeping through the night, waking up to pee more often as well can usually be a sign. The first thing to drop usually is the progesterone, and progesterone helps us sleep. So that's going to be a big one. Sometimes more painful periods, heavier than normal, a little bit more moody, finding more irritability. These are some of the most common ones that I will see based on that. And again, perimenopause symptoms can be literally anything, but I will say that, constipation is another big one too, because we need estrogen to help with digestion as well. But so when that starts declining, we can see that changing. But those are going to be some of the top ones that people will see.
Excellent. Yeah. And I think one of the ones that I think about too is how you talked about heavy periods, but also super, super sporadic periods.
Totally.
And I remember I went into, I was in perimenopause, and it was interesting because I didn't have a period for months and months and months. And I thought, maybe it's over. And then all of the sudden I had this huge period, and it was my last one. So that was like, okay, this is the grand finale
like
Yeah. And I remember one of the emotions very much being coming downstairs. I was married at the time, and I remember one day I came downstairs and I was crying, and he was like, "What's wrong?" Like, I just woke up, and I was like, "I don't know, I just need a hug," like, I was super aware that, like, I didn't have a pinpoint for what was wrong, but I knew something was going on in my body because I was feeling super emotional, and that was not a normal morning for me to wake up and come crying downstairs. Like, that was for sure. I could feel something different happening inside my body. And, when I went through it, for sure, it was a medical menopause for me because I was so young. I was only in my early 40s. I think I was 41 when I went through menopause officially. But it was brought on because I had breast cancer. And so post surgery, a lot of times they give you a drug that also puts you into menopause. They want you to stop making estrogen and progesterone. I had a hormone positive cancer. And so with that, I actually chose not to do the drug, but within, like I said, within about 9 months, I went into menopause anyway. And so it was interesting to see the body like, no, it was like, yeah, we're shutting down the system here. There's not going to be any more, estrogen or progesterone making. And of course that, that affects us all the way around. And I know that, so there's, hormone therapy, there's all these different things out there. Let's tackle what are some of those things that people go to when they are recognizing that they are in this perimenopause state. Is it mostly like, what's the recommendation here in most people's eyes, and like, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, well, adding on to what you were saying, my story as well. Like, I went through chemotherapy at 33, lost my period during it, and then thought everything was done. I was over with treatment, and then boom, thrown into perimenopause. Didn't know what it was for several years because I kept being told, just wait it out. Like, it's just the after effects. But I did not recognize my body. I didn't know what was going on, and it was incredibly scary. And so that's why I'm incredibly passionate about this. Um, and so we'll kind of just jump into the questions that you just asked. So the first line of treatment that people will be brought to immediately and all over social media is something called HRT, so hormone replacement therapy. Now, hormone replacement therapy can work wonders for some people. I mean, they can feel instantaneous relief. They can feel like themselves again. However, that's not everybody. There's still a lot of people in the population, including myself. I'm in early perimenopause and I can't tolerate progesterone. It just is not working for my body. I've tried multiple kinds. I have a history of not being able to tolerate oral birth control. Like, I know where I'm headed. And so that's where I was like, oh, I've got to figure this out because first of all, I can't be the only one going through this. And then, there's people like yourself that it's contraindicated for, right? And I know there are some people coming out saying, hey, if you have had breast cancer, it may not be as risky about taking hormones, and people get to weigh their pros and cons. Like, do I want to take this and risk? Because also too, if you feel horrible, even though you're living post cancer, we've got to weigh the pros and the cons about quality of life. That's a big thing that I feel is important as a cancer survivor myself, letting people make that decision. But now there's people who can't tolerate it, don't want to take it, or maybe they've been told by their doctors that they can't take it. So then what do we do with those people? Right? There's a lot of us out there. And so there's so many different ways, but I would say, well, first is understanding some of the basics of what's happening. We start to not be able to recognize our body. We maybe become more emotional than usual, maybe become more ragey, maybe we're just like extra tired. We feel sluggish in our workouts, and we're just feeling off. So if you're around 35 to 55, and you're experiencing these symptoms, it could be perimenopause. Now, I was 33. So if you've had any major life changes, such as chemotherapy or things like that, you might not be told after treatment that this can happen because people think, oh, it doesn't affect the hormones. When you put anything in your body, it affects the entire system.
Right.
And when your body's hyper stressed, the last thing it cares about is our reproductive system. It's like, keep our heart beating, breathe, brain function. It's like very low on the totem pole is, hey, reproductive system.
Right.
And so understanding that. And so one of the most important things is understanding how to regulate our nervous system. And now this is important because the hormone cascade is this. So a lot of these hormones are started from cholesterol. Cholesterol is broken down into a variety of different types of phases, but I'm just going to just shorten it for just understanding what's going on. So basically, you go down one hormone cascade, and at the end of it, it produces progesterone. And now we need a ratio of progesterone to estrogen, especially in our luteal phase, so that last half of our cycle. And when that ratio becomes down, so maybe our estrogen becomes a little bit more dominant, we can start getting breast tenderness, we can start getting heavier periods, acne, things like that. And so that can happen when either we have too much estrogen or we're not producing enough progesterone. And so if we're chronically in fight or flight, our body actually, they call this like the cortisol steal or the progesterone steal. So basically the body, instead of producing as much progesterone, it will go to produce cortisol because it's thinking we're running from a bear, right?
Right.
So you start getting those symptoms in that last half a year cycle. Usually people will start getting more of them around day 21 until they have their period, just because that's where the progesterone and estrogen peak during that time. So progesterone acts as a calming a hormone to our body. So it helps us feel calm. It helps us regulate. And then now estrogen helps support our neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin. So what basically that means is we might start seeing ADHD symptoms start increasing because of the dopamine changes. You might see depression, anxiety because of serotonin now changing as well. And then, so you could see how this could be happening. So things that we could tolerate before, we can't tolerate as much because our body doesn't have capacity for it. So we need to support those neurotransmitters in other ways. So one way you can support all of your neurotransmitters is simply laughing with friends. So that's going to include all of those different hormones. An antidote to a stress of cortisol is going to be the oxytocin. So that's going to be getting a hug from a friend or any type of connection that's a loving connection that's going to be helpful with boosting serotonin and dopamine. You're looking at going outside, getting sun on your body. You can dance and sing, all these different things to help your body during this time, movement, walking, nature, right? So we have to kind of supplement these things more during this time than maybe we ever have before. And, thinking about breath work, understanding the societal pressures we have as women is insane, right? This honorary selflessness, like, hey, I do everything for everybody else. It has to stop during this time. You cannot feel good during this time, in my opinion, and overgive for everybody else and not take time for yourself.
Yeah.
So that goes even deeper, right? Like, why am I overscheduling myself? Did I say yes when I wanted to say no, right? Am I taking on more at work because I'm worried that I'm the only woman that works there and I'm in a male dominated industry, right? These are real things that we're not talking about that are so much deeper than just doing breath work and movement and things like that. Because you can use those tools, right? But the deeper stuff that's kind of where the money's at, where we want to really look at and address.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking about boundaries, right? That's really part of what we're talking about, boundaries and a little bit of people pleasing and the addressing the inner self-worth. And that's something that shows, I don't care who you are. I don't care how confident you are. It shows up somewhere in there. And part of sometimes being overconfident is because of being able to be like, okay, I've got to put on my avatar and I've got to be able to function and walk in here. And if I'm supposed to be the boss, let me show up as the boss. But inside, internally they could be doing lots of different mental gymnastics or emotional gymnastics around how they're actually feeling when they walk into a room, or they could leave going, oh, everyone's judging me. I'm not the leader that I thought I was, or that I think I can be, or, there's so many different thoughts and scripts that run through our head with all of these different scenarios. And I think that part is important because those scripts have an underlying tone of anxiousness. Yeah. And it's that anxiousness that then affects our nervous system that then sends us into some of these spirals, and no amount of hormone therapy is going to fix those things. So
no, yeah. Exactly. You can't, estrogen's not going to take your people pleasing away. Like, it's just not.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And again, not those replacement therapies are not for everyone. That was one thing that the doctors have talked to me about over the years. It's like, hey, if this feels good for you at some point, you might want to do that. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about hormone replacement therapy for myself personally. Like that right now hasn't shown up as a need or a desire. And I feel, good about all the more natural things that I've been doing for myself. And I also understand that that's not true for everyone. Our bodies function so differently. We all
Totally.
feel differently. We all have a different mindset that we show up in. There's so many factors. I'm over here just trying to do the basics: good, clean eating, exercise, laughing with friends, community. And I honestly, Mary, honestly think that it's the community piece, and it's the
Yeah.
fact that I have such great community relationships and just relationships in general, that's life. Man, that makes my cells happy. Like I don't need
Mhm.
much more beyond that. And also open to the fact that, like, as I continue to age, I'll be over 50 here in a couple of years, and I'm like, okay, what's that going to start to look like? Because I'm watching my friends who are in their, early to mid 50s, and they're really going through some shifts. And I'm watching them also take on a little cortisol belly, and they're struggling with the weight loss. So they're in that phase of life where things really start to shift hormonally. And it does, affects their how spirited they are some days, and it affects their mindset and emotions. And sometimes you just don't feel motivated, and there's all of these little tweaks. And so we want to say, what can we walk into and fix? How can we fix some of these things, but not fix them on the surface, not fix them
Yeah.
just with a pill, but how do we get underneath the surface and fix the root cause? Because so that's the biggest problem that I have with our medical system here in America is we're constantly throwing pills at people and
Yeah.
saying, oh, here you go, let's just fix this symptom, because it's kind of all that anyone knows how to do in that system, and it's set up to succeed that way. We reward you for giving people pills because that's how the system makes money. And so this is where I'm like, oh, but how can we do better things? How can we do better as a community, as a group, and just as individuals, showing up for ourselves and not having to fix everything with a pill. And
Totally.
we're such a quick fix society, and not all of these are very quick fixes in that way. And what's the one, like, exercise, or maybe the one thing you could send someone away with today who's under the anxiety? They are probably have some hormone imbalance showing up, but they haven't gotten to the point yet where they've booked an appointment or gone to see anyone. What would you give them as just a first, like, easy step for regulation?
Yeah. Well, I want to jump back into the cortisol belly stuff after this
Yes,
because
yes.
I want to explain why that's happening. But I would say start recognizing your patterns. Like start understanding, hey, when I feel like shit, right? Like I am feeling depressed, I am feeling like I don't want to do anything, I am negative Nancy. Like what days are those, right? And
Mhm.
are there any themes, right? So if you're still getting your period regularly, you can start tracking this based on, say, if you have a 25-day cycle or 28, whatever that is, start just tracking the dates and then, looking at that based on your menstrual cycle. Now, if you're not consistent enough to have a menstrual cycle, let's start just tracking it too. Let's start tracking, well, what happened the day before, right? What are some patterns I did? Did I poop the day before? Did I not poop that day? Pooping is super important during perimenopause because if we're not pooping, we're not detoxing, and we can get a buildup of estrogen metabolites and other hormone metabolites in our body if we're not pooping regularly. So maybe we ate something that upset our gut. So we know the brain gut connection is a very strong connection. We produce a majority of our serotonin in our gut. So if maybe we ate something that didn't sit well with us, right? Not every, like some people tolerate gluten fine, some people don't. I'm one of those people where I tried to have some sourdough bread last weekend when I was on a trip. I've never been this sensitive to gluten in my life, but
Mhm.
my skin broke out. I was exhausted, bloated, and ragey. And I was like, okay, I noticed that that's what I ate. So, right. So, looking at what we're eating, now what we're doing, have we moved? Have we been outside in nature? Did I have a difficult conversation with somebody? am I watching or listening to things that are heightening my nervous system? I know a lot of people are pressed on these murder podcasts, and I'm like, that is not something you want to listen to when you're already trying to regulate your nervous system. So, and then sleep. Like, did I use my phone up to right before bed? Or did I, maybe eat something that spiked my blood sugar before I went to bed, right? So there's these little patterns that we look at that can give us an idea of what is going on. And if you have, in addition to that, if you have, a lot of people have these, fitness watches. If your fitness watch has your HRV, so your heart rate variability, you can actually some are in real time, or some you can look back in the day and see what is spiking your HRV. We actually want your HRV to be high because it's basically measuring how quickly you go from really fast heart rate to a slower heart rate. So basically stressed to not stressed. So we want it to be higher variability, meaning like we go back to resetting a lot quicker. So you could start looking at all of those things, the patterns. And if you have like an app or something like that, if you have an Apple Watch, you've been collecting this data since you've had it, which is really cool. But you could go back and look like what caused it to drop, what increased it. So you could start pattern recognition is massive during this time. And that's where you get the control. It's almost looking at yourself as a third party, trying not to judge yourself because it's easy to do. But just observing that, because the power is in the patterns. I swear to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they are. And so let's go back to cortisol belly, because let's talk about that. A lot of people showing up with their cortisol belly. They are exercising, they're working out like they did in their 20s and 30s, and they still can't get rid of that midsection fat. What is happening, Mary?
So basically, as estrogen decreases, we lose something called we're not as insulin sensitive. So basically, it's harder for the body to regulate glucose. And so that's blood sugar. And so anytime we have an increase of blood sugar for a prolonged period of time, it goes to our belly. So that's the cortisol belly, right? So the body thinks we're in fight or flight. So it's going to the belly. And that's just one of the major symptoms of it. Now, regulating your blood sugar during this time in general, I think it helps so many chronic illnesses as well. But since we're talking more in perimenopause, this is why the high intensity workouts, the prolonged running, the not resting, all these things are causing the body to stay in fight or flight because we're not having as many recovery days. And so if you're exercising and doing a ton of cardio and not resting, your body just thinks, oh, I'm running from a bear. It's even more sensitive to that. So it's going to produce more cortisol. So that's why you might see people that work out every day with a little belly. And so what happens too is, so when we're in chronic fight or flight, our body, again, produces more cortisol. So even if you're eating what you think might be clean, your stress levels are counteracting that, whether it's physical stress, emotional stress, not sleeping, things like that. Now, it's important to note too that during, in general, the liver processes the estrogen. It's called estradiol, the type of estrogen that we're talking about, but just no estrogen. The liver breaks that down, and that is what is secreted into the bile, which goes into our digestive tract, and then we poop it out. And so the liver also processes glucose. So blood sugar, so the sugar of the blood. So now if we're getting overloaded, right, the liver's getting overloaded. I like to say, think about it as the lines at Costco during a holiday weekend. You're like, the cash register lines at Costco. It's backed up. So we want to support the liver as much as possible. And blood sugar regulation is going to really help with that. And people might be thinking, well, my blood sugar's fine. Well, I thought so too. And then I did one of those. I'm a big fan of the continuous glucose monitors because I wasn't eating a ton of sugar, but my caffeine was spiking my blood sugar all day. All day. Yeah. So it was okay when I did a half a cup, but when I did 1 to 2 cups, it was through the day. I was constantly hungry and just kind of irritable. And I realized, wow, Another one that was surprising too was sweet potatoes and apples for me. But
Wow.
yeah, so that's why there's not these one size fits all for people. Like, I actually tolerate regular sugar better than the fake sugar. The fake sugar spikes my blood sugar.
Got it. Yeah, you're so right about it being different for everyone. I was just sharing this with someone the other day because I don't eat a lot of bread, but when I do, there's a bread I really like, and it is a organic sourdough with walnuts and cranberries. I don't know
Ooh,
why that's my favorite, but it is.
sounds
And I
good.
can literally eat a slice or two, sometimes three if I want to, a day, and I don't gain a pound. It doesn't spike my blood sugar at
Yeah.
all. And it's an interesting thing because it's like a lot of times that's what bread does for most people, but that's the one bread. Now I can't go eat white bread and that
Yeah.
happen. And so it's an interesting thing to know it's this very specific, it's specifically this organic sourdough bread. And it, we all have to figure that out for our own bodies and what works well and what doesn't. I remember I did a whey protein, like I think I had this vanilla one the other day, and it actually caused like an allergic reaction for me, and I was like, oh, this is so weird. I hardly ever have any kind of like allergy sensitivities, but this one was really obvious, and it just made me go, oh, good. Our body shifts and changes as we get older, and different things affect us, and it's just being really more aware for each of us that there isn't a one size all, which is also why the pill to fix the thing doesn't work for a lot of people, because it's usually something unrelated, and we can so many times rewind to our nervous system, which is something we have in our power to do work around and control through somatic healing, through breath work, through movement in the body, just all these different ways that no one really talks about when you're going to a doctor's office. I can't remember the last time my mom, me, anyone in my family or my friends went to a doctor's office to say, hey, I'm feeling this way, and the doctor said, are you aware of your nervous system? Like, how are you doing? Like, that doesn't happen. The
No.
question I think they're required to ask now is, are you feeling depressed? I think that's one of them that shows up. It was funny to hear them say that. I was like, wait, what? She goes, we're supposed to ask. I was like, okay. I was like, no, do I seem depressed? She's like, no. And I was like, that's interesting. But I was like, wow. So what is showing up? Like, what on their end is now prompting that? Like, enough people are in depression that they need to ask the question and then dive a little deeper. So is that part of some weird like bedside manner training that they got, but they didn't like close the loop on, right? They're like, well, ask this question and then be really empathetic.
Well, also, like, I'm not going to lie, most healthcare practitioners in the Western world are disconnected from their own bodies. I was one of them. It took me cancer to get me out, right? And so I have to have just kind of keeping that in mind. We are literally rewarded when we disconnect from our body because we increase productivity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I remember times where I like held my pee for like 3 hours just because I needed to get patients in. I could barely take a lunch, because had to do notes, and you don't really realize how messed up it is until you kind of come out of it for a bit and you're like, how was I doing that? And this can translate into anything, like at work, right? Like, I think that I'd say the two most important things during perimenopause is understanding these deeper rooted motivators that are causing us, even perimenopause, that cause us to kind of get all riled up because it's tapping on something unhealed inside of us. And then add on, we don't have the hormonal support like we did that may have helped kind of keep it at bay for a while. And then now the perimenopause is like, no, we're not doing this shit anymore,
Right. Right.
And, but then blood sugar regulation is going to be massive for helping control those symptoms because, also too, on top of that, like thinking about now that the liver helps with the detoxing or breaking down estrogen and the hormones, we're also looking at blood sugar regulating, right? Because the blood sugar moves through the liver. Now, this is why people can't tolerate alcohol as much during this time because the liver's already. So the biggest things that we have to really consider are blood sugar regulation, caffeine, and alcohol. Like, we really might want to consider stopping or significantly limiting alcohol because we need that liver for support. Now, Eastern medicine talks about the liver holding anger. So this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. Like, what are some unprocessed things that we're angry about? I know as a recovering people pleaser, I built a lot of resentment for a lot of people that took advantage of me, but I also let it. Right. And so those are pretty crucial things to look into. But I loved what you were saying is like, listening to the body. Well, what does that mean? I remember people would always say that, and I just get people to start really recognizing, like, just check in. Like, I noticed myself driving with my shoulders hiked and then clenching and squeezing my thighs. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then when I feel myself rushing around, I'm like, where am I going? What am I rushing for? Right. And so you start being like, where did I learn that from? Because we're born as babies. We're not rushing around. We don't need productivity. Like, somewhere we learned that, and we get to untrain that. In our reality, we get to shift it too, like our perception of things. Do I want to hold this anger, or do I want to look at this in another way? Yes, this person wronged me, but it's only affecting me when I'm holding that. And I need my liver right now,
Right. Yeah. And then I think that also steps into another one that people often are looking at, again, externally for a thing or for a symptom, for a cure, for whatever, when so often it's really the question is, can you also just look back? Can you mirror to yourself and also figure out, are you angry with yourself? Because that's also a lot of people. They're angry with themselves because maybe they're angry with themselves for allowing someone else to take advantage of them. They're angry with themselves for XYZ. Like, there's also that piece of the coin that I think is really important for folks to look at, because there's also, it can be easy to bypass, and bypassing would look like pointing the finger at someone else and saying, well, they made me this way. They did this to me, and that's why I am this way. Well, let's dig through that. Let's dig through that. I agree. Like, when people show up and they've done you wrong, and you can see those things so clearly. Yes. And can you also own that you can empower yourself and choose to not allow them to take up any more space in your body, not allow them to take up any more space in your nervous system, not allow them to take up any more space in your brain, like all of those things. And I know it's easier said than done. And also, going back to our breath is such a beautiful way to do that. Going back to ways to regulate our nervous system through some movement, through somatics. I see so many, especially coaches, wellness coaches these days, all are using somatic therapies now in what they're doing, because breath work and movement, myself included, are all a big piece of that. People just aren't moving enough, and they're not breathing enough. And it's so weird to say that because it sounds odd. I think if you were an alien that came to our planet and you heard me say that, you'd be like, what is happening down here? And it's the truth, that from its most simplest form, we're not taking time to breathe. We're not taking time out. We're like hustling through, and we're living by expectations that aren't even our own. And that is wreaking havoc on our nervous system, and which wreaks havoc on our bodies and our emotions. One of the things that I love about the work you do, Dr. Mary, is that you've also done a lot of work with pelvic floor and watching how emotions can be stored in different places in the body. And I think that isn't talked about enough either. And I would love to dive into some of that with you today, because one of the things that I've found, one of the things that I love, is I know that, especially for myself, that as we get older and, our pelvic floor can weaken, especially if we're not sexually active, or we're not having some level of activity, of exercise going down in our pelvic floor. And there's other activities besides sex that we can do to strengthen our pelvic floor. But I do find that as we get older, these things start to shift. And sometimes, it's the smallest tweaks that make the biggest difference. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what is something in the work you've done around pelvic floor that you've seen, the emotional, the physio emotional connection there?
Yeah, I mean, the body can store emotions pretty much anywhere in the body, but you'll see a lot more in the pelvic floor. But the areas, when we hear these people having somatic releases, it's in when they're moving oftentimes the deeper fascia. That's when people will experience some of those releases. Obviously, it's hard to study that, right, from a scientific standpoint. But when you see it happen enough, you're like, it's a thing, and you see it a lot more in pelvic floor therapy. And so some of the most common things, so just some common changes that you'll see are going to be, sometimes people feel like they can't feel their clitoris as much. And so that can be helpful actually with, we can use vaginal estrogen for that. And vaginal estrogen is more local to the tissue, so it doesn't go into the bloodstream as much. If people aren't comfortable with that, there's hyaluronic acid that can help support the tissues intravaginally as well. But usually you'll find if you start feeling more dryness, things like that, decreased libido, those are going to be some signs of that. But also chronic pelvic tension is usually somebody that's in constant fight or flight. And so again, addressing the nervous system, right? Because when we go into fight or flight, we clench our jaws and we clench our pelvic floor, like enter and exit, or enter, whatever. All of our 3 holes, right? I guess 4 with the urethra. You're going to clench because the body's like, I'm not trying to eat, I'm not trying to be penetrated, and I'm not trying to poop. I just want to run from a bear, right? Like that's what it thinks. And so if people find they're in chronic tension in those areas, that's going to be important too. But when estrogen decreases, the pelvic floor muscles can feel weaker. And so sometimes people actually feel their prolapse more during this time, so pelvic organ prolapse. And it's not that all of a sudden they got prolapse, it's that the tissues in the vagina, when they have a decrease in estrogen, they can feel chapped. Like think about your chapped lips. If you were smiling with chapped lips, you can feel that, versus when it's lubricated and not cracked and things like that, you don't notice it. So that's sometimes why during perimenopause, people will start feeling more of those heaviness symptoms. They feel like they need to pee twice because they just stayed up and they peed. They feel like they're pooping, and then they're wiping, but then they go back and they're like, why do I have poop stains? What's going on? Those are some signs that we might have a prolapse, and those can be different types of prolapse. But it's basically combining all of these different things. You'll see increased urgencies to pee. And so that's going to be important, where we can we can do a bladder diary and look at what are the things that are setting off our bladder. Maybe we chill on those for a little bit, let the bladder recover, or maybe during this transitional time of our lives, we have to lay off more of the caffeine and maybe the alcohol, which are 2 major bladder irritants. And I know that's hard, especially if people have, love that glass of wine. You get to decide, like, do I feel okay after I have this? Am I willing to take the pros and cons with it? Some people might feel fine with their glass of wine. It just depends on the person.
Yeah.
But you'll see some of those. And so then with that, if the bladder's irritated and we have pelvic floor weakness, and we might notice some more leakage. So there's more things that we can do to help increase that strength, especially around the urethra.
Nice.
Is where it's like a little straw from the bladder, basically.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. So many things when our body starts to change as we get older. And I think that oftentimes, we, we see such a different behavior. Like, for example, when we talk about men going through midlife crisis, that's usually when we start seeing them go buy convertibles, and we start seeing, maybe a rise in affairs. And so there's definitely something emotional happening, that's usually the external factor. Whereas with women, I feel like ours is things like, I got to pee all the time, or, wow, I can't hold my bladder, and it could feel dry. Like, there's so many different things that happen to us internally. And then we also emotionally are going through our own, again, mental gymnastics in our head, our emotional gymnastics, while our body is also physically going through something. And it's so just interesting to see how the manifestation is just different in each person.
Well, men go through their own perimenopause too. It's just not the way that it's not talked about as much, but their testosterone starts to decrease, right? They can get more depressed, they can get more anxious, they can be more recluse. You can start seeing like they have erectile dysfunction. Maybe their orgasms are different. You'll also see hair loss, like balding, right? And so they don't talk about it as much. So you're not going to hear about it as much, but they're going through their own. And these same tools apply for them too. And so it's important that, we're including men in this conversation, because they're going, like, that's what they're told. Society tells them, go get a a hot 20-year-old, like, that will make you feel younger, when the reality is, what's going on inside of me? Why do I feel this void? What inner work do I need to do? And they're not taught those skills either. It's, with women, we're taught, oh, always have girlfriends, things like that. And then, men, a lot of the conversations for mainstream media teaches men to talk about sports and, who they're, a woman maybe that they like or
Yeah.
dating or whatever. And then how much money they make. Right. And they're worth so much more than that.
Well, a lot of it can also be just telling them to go cave and figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? That's oftentimes, it's not go seek support, it's just
Yeah.
go figure it out. And so I think that can be a lot of pressure too. So, kudos to our men out there that are trying to break those generational generalizations, and you do the work and figure out like, hey, you can get into your own body and regulate your nervous system and go seek support. The friends that are male friends of mine that I find to feel the most supported when they're going through stuff are the ones who are doing men's work. And when I say doing
Yeah.
men's work, meaning they're part of men's circles.
Yeah.
They have a group of men that are, their tribe, their people who they can go and talk to about what's happening and what's going on, the things that men go through, that they can get understanding from other men. And like I said, women, we're much better about that, I think, sort of naturally, but men are usually not quite as invited into those things. And so it's a beautiful thing to watch men go and find those invitations and really sit with other men and understand like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, I can sit with other men who are going through what I'm going through, and we can come up with some solutions together. And that's some beautiful work in the world.
Oh,
Mary,
it's much needed for
yes,
sure.
yes, for sure, much needed. And so let's talk through, you, again, such a wizard in the work that you do. If you could go back in time and
Yeah.
you were, working with younger Mary, what is the thing that you wish you knew then that you know now? What would have given you maybe a little more edge, a little more, like, you would have gotten to some conclusions, or you would have beat back some old beliefs a lot faster?
I would have really, I didn't realize I had complex PTSD. I thought
Mm.
I thought I had I thought I had a normal life. I didn't know. I don't know if you've ever taken the ACE score, but it's like it
Yeah.
determines your childhood or some type of trauma experience your life. And I think it's out of 9. I had 8 or something, and
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much I was just coping. I was coping with humor. I was coping with alcohol. And I was coping with very superficial relationships, and then just getting into not so great relationships that matched my trauma, because that's all that I knew. And so I don't wish, I think everything was meant to happen the way it did. But if I were to go back, is really leading into, understanding my nervous system and what that meant, like these inner narratives. I'm not perfect at this, because I'm human, and I don't want to I don't want people to think, well, she's got it all figured out. I'm like, no, like, I don't. And I have a lot of days where I'm like, I'm kind of feeling down myself, and I have to recognize I've been through a lot in my life. And in that, I would have liked to have found more of that, I'd say, kindness to myself, and allowing myself to truly lean on people that can be there for me. And so,
Mm.
and then the other piece is, I wish I would have dove in more and truly understood the body. I just kind of gave my power externally because I had dealt with chronic illness for 20 years prior to cancer. And I just wish I would have really kind of taken in the reins of it, like really tried to understand the body, versus like, oh, nobody else can figure me out, so I'm just here and kind of playing a victim.
Mm.
And so that's when I dove into understanding the nervous system, somatics, understanding fascia, and how the lymphatic system ties in with that, right? So if we're in chronic fight or flight, the fascia restricts, and the fascia is the highway for our lymphatic system, which is our detox, one of our major detox systems. So you can feel like shit when that's not flowing as efficiently
Let's
or
talk
more
about
stagnant.
Yeah, let's talk about fascia because I think some people are like they haven't either heard that word or maybe they've heard it but they don't know what it is. Is there like a brief? Can you give us like maybe an example of like if fascia were a fruit, what would it be? What would it be in that fruit?
I would say if you're gonna, I feel like a better example might be like a piece of steak.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
but a
Let's talk
fruit,
about steak. We all know
yeah,
what a
okay.
steak looks like.
So when you peel apart, there's like a thin membrane. It's not the meat, it's not the fat, but there's like a thin like white tissue that you'll kind of peel away or you'll see on the tissue. That's going to be what fascia is like. And if you're going to use a fruit, I'd say like the tangerine, you kind of peel off that and there's all this like gunky stuff in between the tangerine and then the skin. So that's what it's going to be like. And so basically our entire body is surrounded in fascia, and it's more recently being studied in the last 20 or 30 years or so, but it has a direct impact on our health because everything is surrounded in it, right? And so we have two major layers of this to oversimplify it. We have our skin, and then we have some ligaments that then connect to the superficial fascia. So think of it as like just like straight lines kind of connecting it like I don't know, like think of like a jail cell. The top part is the skin. The bars are the skin ligaments. And then you've got the superficial fascia there. Now, in that layer is where a majority of our lymphatic system flows. So our lymphatic system helps support our immune system. It helps things flowing. It helps detox our body. So if that layer is restricted, which can happen actually in perimenopause because estrogen causes fascia to turn more into what we call type 1 collagen, which is basically thicker. So you can imagine that highway is going to be a little bit more restricted. And then underneath that, you've got a fat layer as well. And then you've got your deep fascia. Now your deep fascia surrounds your muscles, individual muscles, the groups of muscles, and they all need to glide over each other. So when that becomes thicker, more restricted, that's when we can see sometimes more pain. Like a lot of times people will be like, I just feel stiff. And they think it's their joints, which yes, estrogen has receptors in the joints, but it also can be actually more of the fascia. So we're looking at that as helping us with pain as well. So the typical model for physical therapy and what we've seen is muscles, ligaments, bones. But we have not really incorporated the fascia into Western medicine. And I believe it's going to explode in the next 5 to 10 years just because you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Like people that wouldn't get better with traditional PT, like they get drastically better, sometimes immediately, sometimes within weeks. It's a game changer. And so those tissues need to glide over each other. It's like saran, say if you have saran wrap over your leg or those muscles in your legs, and then you have another layer on top of that's saran wrap, you need like a little gel to glide it. And that's hyaluronic
Mm.
acid that we have there. And so all of these things can become affected. So that's another super important layer in that. But
Mm.
it's a pretty wild, like, as you know, I'm obsessed with it. I've been talking about it in our business group because you can't unsee how it affects our body.
Yeah.
So
Totally. Amazing. Amazing. Well, I'm excited to see more studies on fascia because I am fascinated with it as well. Fascinated with fascia and just how it works in the body and all the things that it's connected to. And it's interesting because I feel like people are awakening to just what is our body telling us and what have we not discovered yet. And fascia is probably in one of those categories of something that we're still scratching the surface on. So that's really beautiful. All right, y'all. Well, if you've been doing all the right things, eating clean, stretching, going to PT, and you're still in any pain, just know it's not because you're broken, but it's probably because you're only treating the body. And that pain actually still lives in your nervous system. So there's a way to get back into your body through breath work, through somatics, through great healing and great healers like Dr. Mary here, who is making a difference and really bridging the gap. If you'd like to get in touch with our guest today, just check out the show notes or pop down into the comment section and you are going to see a way to get all of the goods. Mary, real quick, do you want to tell us the easiest way to get in touch with you?
Yes, drmarygrimberg.com is my website. And then I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at drmarypt. So Dr. Mary PT.
Yes, give her a like and a follow. She's super funny also. So I'll throw that in there. It's you will be entertained. Awesome. Well, y'all, that's today's live show. If you want more, we are on YouTube at the MadLove Your Life Show. And we love it when you like and subscribe. Until next time, may abundance always walk beside you. May joy always go before you. And may love always guide you on your path. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. We air live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bold Brave TV. We hope to see you back next week. For more ways to connect with my guests, content, programs, and retreats, just head over to www.marydee.com and subscribe. That's MARYDEE.com.